Welcome to the second edition of our Top 11 podcast. This is a offshoot of the Goldcast family. We are going to be, these episodes will consist of us focusing on top 11s of any subject. So it won't just be sports. We're going to go movies, music. I mean, all different types of pop culture genres will be in our top 11 podcast. This week, we are going to continue our Bay Area run with the top 11 Bay Area sports teams of all time. And as I want to talk a little bit more about it, but first let's get through the formalities. Raymond, why don't you let them know where can they find us?
You can find us on Facebook.com/The Goldcast, and you can also follow us on Twitter at @the_Goldcast, and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same moniker of The Goldcast. Like, subscribe, and comment. You're welcome to reach out to us on Twitter and Instagram. However, if you want to be a part of the general discussion, YouTube is the best platform for that, and also notifies you when we go live with new episodes.
Boom. And Candlestick Will, why don't you let them know where they can reach out to us directly for the top 11 podcasts?
Well, we have it very easy to find on Twitter at Top 11 Podcast, Top 11 Podcast, and go there and submit your entries for the different topics, and go ahead and reply to the most recent tweet for the greatest Bay Area teams.
There it is. All right. And then Raymond, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Rudy Solis, and I'm on Instagram at RudySolis1.
And you can find me on Instagram at Rudy Solis 3, RUDYSOLIS 3, and on Twitter at Rudy Solis 3RD. Candlestick Will, where can they find you?
You can find me at Twitter at Candlestick Will.
Boom. All right. Here we go. We're going to get into it. I'm going to lay all the rules out, everything for how our top 11 podcast works after what is without question the greatest podcast intro in the game, the Goldcast intro. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready? This is the Goldcast.
Boom. Welcome to another edition of the Top 11 Podcast. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
and our esteemed co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how the top 11 podcast works. So there's a couple of real basic, simple rules. Okay. Number one, we have not revealed our lists to each other. So this top 11 Bay Area sports teams of all time, none of us know what the other one has chosen. As far as the requirements for this list, Candlestick will set the requirements for this as being none. We could choose any reason for this team being in our top 11 Bay Area sports teams of all time. The way we're going to go through is we're going to start. We go 11 through 8, right, guys? There's 11 through 8.
11 through 8.
7 through 4. And then honorable mentions. And then our top final 3 greatest top 11 Bay Area sports teams of all time. Okay, so the only other thing, I think that's pretty much all the rules, right? That's everything.
That's pretty much everything.
Awesome. All right. So now let's start. Raymond, I want you to start first with just a general overview of what you were looking for when you were deciding what teams were going to be on your top 11, and then I'll say mine, and then Candlestick Will, you'll say yours. So what was your overall requirements? Without giving us the list first, what were you deciding? What was the criteria a team had to meet to make your top 11, Ray?
Well, similar to our last top 11 podcast, which was the greatest 49ers of all time, the greatest 11, championships really played a huge factor in the order and who I would include in the final list And so that's kind of was the big motivating anchor that I used to pick the teams.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't really look at anything else. There was anything like honorable mentions. I just looked at kind of season performance, and I didn't take championship into account because everyone that is in my honorable mention, to give you a little hint here, wasn't involved in a championship.
So is it fair to say that every team in your top 11 has won a championship?
No.
Ooh, okay. For me, I will say
winning wasn't the only criteria. So it was either winning or.
All right. So for me, I kept it really simple, and in order to make my top 11, you had to have won a championship. So that was my one requirement. My one requirement was the season had to end in a ring. That was the one requirement I had. I just gave that. So if you didn't win a ring, you were not on my top 11 Bay Area sports teams of all time. What about you, Candlestick Will? What was your criteria when developing your list?
Well, I ended up once I kind of went through all the different teams that were worthy of consideration, I realized it was a lot easier if I kind of lumped, mini dynasty, mini group of teams, 2-3 years of a team together. So just looking at the list based on the question you just asked, the 11th best team didn't win a ring, but the other 10 have at least one ring.
Nice. Okay, there you go. I don't want to say anything further on mine as far as that kind of thing, but why don't we start, Raymond? You usually are lead bat on this. Give us your 11 through 8.
Yes. So number 11 for me starts off with the San Francisco Giants from 2002 that went to the World Series but lost to the Anaheim Angels in 7 games. They had a season record of 95-66. But I chose them because, A, they got to a championship. It was the only championship that Barry Bonds would appear in. And that, bears some significance on its own, given the gravity of his career. So I felt it at least necessary to throw him in the mix somewhere in there because the 80s and 90s teams were good. They didn't have long stretches of success like the latter group, the most recent group, but they did get mentioned in that regard. Number 10 for me was the 2012 49ers that went to the Super Bowl and lost against the Baltimore Ravens 34-31. They finished that season with an 11-4 and one tie in that season. And then number 9 for me is actually the who is it? This is going to be a little. People might have a debate about this, but I put the San Francisco 49ers from 2011 to 2013 that went to 3 straight NFC Championship games, including a Super Bowl, but I put them in there because it was a stretch. So I do have one lone team there, but they get mentioned twice in this regard. But it was a stretch of 3 years of 3 straight NFC Championship games that I threw in there because it was such a powerhouse of a team that came out of nowhere. From we were in the bottom of the barrel with lots of talent, but not being able to really find the coach to bridge it all together. And Jim Harbaugh came out of nowhere and really kind of brought us to prominence overnight. And that was a big deal for all of us watching because, he came from Stanford at the time. And so there was all of these comparisons, from Bill Walsh coming from Stanford at the time, although Bill Walsh had, back-to-back 2-14 seasons before he really started to turn things around. And Jim Harbaugh really came out of the gate swinging, which is very, very symbolic of his personality. but so that was that group, and those are some last minute changes too. I actually had that team higher up, but I decided that they belonged in the early group because the early group is the non-winning group with the exception of my number 8 team. So my number 8 team, and this is really difficult to say, but this is the 1976 Oakland Raiders that won the Super Bowl, and they won it with Kenny Stabler. They had a record of 13-1 that year. And I put them in there because they won it. And we had to look at teams that won, and we were considering teams all over across the Bay Area, professional teams. Not to, I think we had some brief discussions about college and other levels, but not everybody's well versed in those categories. So to keep it simple, we kept it here. And they of course won against the Philadelphia Eagles 27-10. It was a very dominant performance. So that's my number 8. So to read them off again, just so everyone's clear, I picked the 2012 San Francisco Giants, the 2012 San Francisco 49ers, the 2011 through 2013 San Francisco 49ers, and the 1976 Oakland Raiders.
You just said a different Giants team. Did you mean the 2002 Giants?
Sorry, yes, 2002 Giants.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part for me, was having to go across the pond to Oakland and decide that obviously I, as a San Francisco born and bred native, I don't like Oakland teams. The A's are probably the one team that I think many people will proudly and gladly root for, the A's and the Giants. Unfortunately, I do not fall in that category. I don't really like the A's. I've never really cared for the A's. I've tried to watch the A's. I made a run at it, I think in 2012 or 2013, but within the first 2 weeks, I just couldn't do it. I was like, I hate this team. I just hated them because I was watching them. I don't hate them. I actually do not hate the A's. I don't have any. I actually think they're the coolest, the nicest, coolest uniforms in all of sports. It's my favorite uniform in all of sports, is that green and yellow. It's just so clean. It doesn't look the same on the Packers. It's a slightly different yellow. And I don't know. I think the A's have the coolest hats, coolest uniforms. I'll give them that. But that was probably the toughest part for me, was having to go across the pond. I also, I have to ask Candlestick Will, because I already know where you're going to lean, Ray, because I'm pretty confident in this. I only went with the top 3 sports. I went MLB, NBA, NFL. I did not include NHL. Did you include NHL, Candlestick Will? Any Sharks teams make it?
I have a Sharks thing in my honorable mentions.
Okay, that's cool. But none in the top 11. We all stuck to the main 3. Okay, just checking. If the Sharks had won a Stanley Cup, I probably would have put them in somewhere. That probably would have been my 11. All right, so let me go through mine. So my number 11, as I said, my one requirement was that you had to have won a championship to make it to Rudy's top 11. And my number 11 was the 2012 Giants, record of 94-68. This is the one in the middle of the dynasty. I think the one that probably sometimes is the forgotten one of the three, even though it's the one where we swept the Tigers, like absolutely just destroyed them and just ripped them to shreds. It was the first NL sweep since the Reds in 1990, and the first team from the National League to sweep someone since like the 60s that wasn't named the Reds. As we said, we swept the Tigers, but on the way to it, we also got to defeat the 2011 champs, the St. Louis Cardinals, and that was pretty awesome. Great run. Really enjoyed the 2012 Giants. Number 10 on my list was the 1984 49ers. This was the second championship. This was the 15-1 season, and we defeated Dan Marino and the Dolphins, his one and only appearance. And everyone was so sure that the 49ers were going to lose to the Dan Marino-led Miami Dolphins. I think it was his second year as a Dolphin, and we kicked their ass. So that's that. Number 9 is the 2014 Giants, the classic 7-game series against the Royals, my personal favorite World Series of all time. Madison Bumgarner delivering the greatest single performance in World Series history. I put that at number 9. Number 8 is the 2015 Golden State Warriors. The first ring in 40 years.
Interesting.
Yes, I put them at number 8.
Our lists are going to be vastly different.
They're going to be really different. I told you they're going to be
They're already really different.
So different. The second I said, well, I included teams that have rings, that they could only have rings, I was like, these are going to be really different. But yeah, so 2012 Giants, 1984 49ers, 2014 Giants, 2015 Golden State Warriors. That the first ring in 40 years. That was the one. All right, Candlestick Will, you're next.
All right, so my number 11 is the 1993 Giants. 103 wins and created the wild card because they won so many games. Number 10 is the 1988 through 1990 Oakland A's. 3 World Series appearances in a row, 1 championship. Number 9 is the 1974-75 and 75-76 Golden State Warriors. They won only 48 games in 74-75, but they won the championship, and they won 59 games the very next season and could have easily won a second championship. And for number 8, I have the 1992 through 1994 San Francisco 49ers that could have easily won 3 straight Super Bowls, finally beat the Cowboys in 94, and won the Super Bowl in 94.
Boom, I know. So you mentioned this before too. You were kind of lumping categories of teams, and even though that's actually probably why the 14 and the 12 Giants for me are so high, because they're essentially the same team. The performances and the roads to get there were just so completely different. That's why I separated them. I have lumped eras together later on in this list, but not on the first one. And that's actually why I separated the 12 and the 14, even though they're really similar teams. The fact that they were a year apart and Bumgarner's dominance in 14, we basically were on the back of Bumgarner. And in 12, we still had Kane and then Zito with the big, for once, finally earning that giant paycheck and really coming through against I think it was the Reds in the wild card. Am I right?
For
right?
2012?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the Reds. Now, Raymond, I want to go to yours. So you included the 2011 as one, but then
2012 is one.
2012 is one, and then 2010 through 12 at 13 is another one. Am I right?
Yeah, because I included them because it was a lone Super Bowl appearance, and that in my book, based on my
personal criteria.
Yeah, I decided that they needed to be on the list, but then at the same time, I didn't want to dismiss 3 straight NFC championships because that's really difficult to do. And only a few teams have done that multiple times.
We've done it a bunch.
Yeah, because the Niners are great.
Yeah.
So it was a great feat to that I couldn't ignore. So I had to put it in there somehow. But I had them higher on the list, and I decided to move them down because other teams have accomplished more. And so I wanted to give the credit. Make sure make sure the order was representative of the criteria that I was putting in. And I also would like to make a correction. So the 1976 Raiders beat the Minnesota Vikings in the Super Bowl with Kenny Stabler as a score of 32-14, not the Philadelphia Eagles, which was the next Super Bowl that they would win.
Were they in Los Angeles? They were in Los Angeles though, weren't they? Or was that still Oakland?
The
76 was Oakland.
Was Oakland.
But was I was asking about the Eagles one.
The Eagles was Oakland, and then the last one they won in '83 was LA.
Yeah, so because I didn't include them winning in the Eagles won in '80 and then the Redskins in '83 because that was both Los Angeles.
80 was Los Angeles too.
I believe so. I can double check.
Yeah, I knew the 84 one.
The 80s one, according to Pro Football
Reference, it was
says
Oakland.
Oakland.
Oh, it was Oakland. Okay.
All right.
So I'll add that to my honorable mention then.
Man, including the Raiders was tough. See, this is part of why this is this are your own biases come in, and when we're doing a Bay Area sports team, I'm going to be fair, but it's hard to include the Raiders. Also because they've left so many times. Giants have not left since being here. Warriors moved from San Francisco to Oakland, but back to San Francisco. So since I'm from San Francisco, I'm okay with that. And the Giants have never moved since being here. The Niners have been here from the get. The Warriors have not really moved. They've always been marketed as a Bay Area team. They're not. Ever since changing the moniker to Golden State Warriors, they are no longer. It's the one team we all rally for, and I think that's great.
And in case those comments come in, the 49ers moved their stadium, but they did not change cities. There's a difference there. Many professional sports teams do not play in the city that is part of their team name.
Yeah, the city they represent is not necessarily the city that they play in.
The Giants and Jets don't even play in the right state, so
Here you go.
Exactly.
All right, Raymond, let's go 7 through 4.
So 7 was the 1975 Golden State Warriors that won against the Washington Bullets and actually swept them 4-0. They finished the regular season with a 48-34 record, so I have them at number 7. Number 6 is the Jim Plunkett era Raiders. The 1980 and 1983 championship teams led by Jim Plunkett, they were 23-9 combined over those two seasons. The first one in 1980 was the Philadelphia one I previously mentioned by mistake, which they won 27-10. And then they moved to Los Angeles within a couple years and beat the Washington Redskins 38-9. So all three of their championships were pretty convincing wins. There was never any doubt by these contests, especially when you look at the scoring by quarter. And then number 5 on my list is the 1988 through 1990 Oakland Athletics, who posted a combined record of 306 wins, 180 losses, which is pretty darn impressive, which really kind of makes you, as an A's fan, which I am, I'm a little disappointed that they were only able to come out with one championship. And two of those, the first, they lost in 1988 to the LA Dodgers 4-1, which has the amazing Oral Hershiser game, which is impressive even if you can't stand the Dodgers. I did like Oral Hershiser though. And of course the famous Earthquake series in 1989 where the Athletics swept the Giants 4-0, only to get swept again in the following year by the Cincinnati Reds in 1990. So an impressive run there, because it's really difficult to win 3 straight championships in baseball. Only a couple teams have done it since the 70s.
It's really hard to do in any franchise that's not the NBA.
Yeah, so it's really difficult. So I had to put them in there because that was just a tremendously awesome team, and I liked the A's and the Giants back then as a kid, but I liked more players on the A's because they were going to more championships and they had more exciting players back then. Although Will Clark was still my favorite player back then, but I was a big McGuire and Canseco and Ricky Henderson fan, and of course Dennis Eckersley. They just had so many names that I had their baseball cards. I had everything. So they're there at number 5. So just to recap,
well, who's number 4?
Who's number 4?
Oh, number 4 is the 1972 through 1974 Oakland Athletics, the team that did go to 3 straight and won 3 straight. I put them ahead of the 88-90 team for obvious reasons because they won 3, and none of those were easy except for the last one. They beat the Cincinnati Reds, who got revenge in 1990. They beat them in 7 games in 1972. They beat the New York Mets in 7 games in 1973, and then they beat the LA Dodgers in 1974. They beat them 4-1. So it was kind of interesting how the 88 through 90 team played out because 2 of the teams that lost to them in the 70s ended up exacting revenge on them, almost in kind of reverse order, the way it happened. But I threw them in there because that was a crazy team that my dad our father always spoke about, and that's what kind of helped me get into baseball, because he would talk about how they won 3 straight, and I thought that was amazing. So I kept watching, hoping that I would see that again, and when I did, they only managed to get 1 out of it. They were 277 wins and 202 losses throughout that 3-year stretch, winning 90 games or more each of those seasons, or I think for the most part. Let me, I can actually look that up live here with our fact-checking tools, specifically exclusive to the Top 11 podcast.
Let's say the top.
Yeah, they did. So they won 94 the first season, 90 the second, and 98 in the last one. So a really impressive win there. Although the 306 by the later team was more impressive. But that's so those are my 4 teams. So the 1975 Golden State Warriors, the 1980 and 83 Oakland Raider championship teams, the late 80s, early 90s A's, and then of course the infamous 70s Bad Boy Athletics.
Boom. All right, man, our lists are so different. All right, so number 7 for me is the 1981 San Francisco 49ers. This was obviously the NFC Championship against the Dallas Cowboys. I actually talked about this on a Goldcast episode a couple weeks back. We had gone to 3 straight appearances in the 70s, between 71 and 73, against the Dallas Cowboys, and 3 straight times. 2 of those NFC championships, last one divisional round. But we had gone to 3 straight and had lost. And the last one was in miserable fashion. We were like up by 21 points. It was in the 4th. It was ridiculous. But the 49ers then, led by Joe Montana and the great Bill Walsh, come back to defeat the Demon. For some reason, the 49ers always have to best a Demon. That's just what we do. We had to do that against the Cowboys in 81, again in the 90s. We had to do that. We had to do that again just now with the Seattle Seahawks. There's always a beast that stands in front of the 49ers. It seems like the 49ers, in order to break through, must defeat some rival that's just had our number over and over and over again. And that's just, I don't know, that's just the 49ers way. And so the 1981, it kickstarted the dynasty, and I thought that made sense to have it be the team to start this next chunk of teams. Number 6, I put the 1977 Oakland Raiders. That 13-1 record, going 13-1, one shy of a perfect record in the 1970s NFL era, was extremely impressive to me. And so they are the sole Oakland Raiders
Was
team.
it though? Was it though?
You know, any other team would be real.
I just didn't feel like you didn't sound sincere there.
They could have gone 14-0, and I'd have been like, good job, I guess.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm going to have a big question for you when you're done with this. Hold on, go ahead.
All right. The 1994 49ers are 5th on my list. Steve Young takes the monkey off his back. It's the final Super Bowl of the dynasty, and that roster was bananas, as we've mentioned in the previous Top 11 podcast, greatest 49ers of all time. We have some discussions about that 1994 49ers roster. And my number 4 team, the best team of this. We do this in chunks, so now I see them each as a chunk. So I go 11 through 8. Who makes 11 through 8? And the number 1 team on the 11 through 8 list for me was the 2015 Golden State Warriors. And the number 4 guy, but the number 1 on this list is the 2010 San Francisco Giants. The first title in San Francisco. The first title since the 49ers. The first team to bring a title to San Francisco since the 49ers. The first title in 50 years for that franchise, and really delivering what the 1989 Giants could not deliver, delivering what the 2002 San Francisco Giants could not deliver. And there was another one in the 60s, but I didn't look it up, so I'm not going to. Candlestick Will or Ray, you guys might be able to rattle that off like the back of your hand, but definitely the modern era Giants, those 2 titles, they finally deliver. Bruce Bochy, Tim Lincecum, Matt Cain, these guys really are kind of obviously the mid-season arrival, Buster Posey, really kind of cemented that run, the Misfits crew. So my crew, once again, I go number 7, 1981 49ers. Number 6, the 1977 Oakland Raiders. Number 5, the 1994 San Francisco 49ers. And the 2010, number 4, the 2010 San Francisco Giants. Head off before I go into the final 3, my final 3 greatest Bay Area sports teams of all time. Candlestick Will, you said you had a question.
Yeah, so you have the 1984 49ers, the 15-1 49ers on your list, and you have the 1976 Raiders on your list. Both teams lost one game, so how do you justify the Raiders higher than the Niners?
Because I have higher Niners teams.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that's why. I thought about that too.
Well, because the only reason I even asked is because when you said that the Raiders only lost one game, I was like, wait a minute, your 84 Niners lost one game too. So I just didn't know what the...
They did. That's why I put them in the, like, I was like, all right, I look at these almost like if we're looking at like we're curating an album, right? And like, so each 11 through 8 is its own album, 7 through 4. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I'll put the 84 Niners. That'll be the first track of the Niners on this album list. I'll put them first. They defeat Dan Marino. They get, it's the best record in football up until the Patriots. It was the best record. Was the 15-1. They were the first team to win more regular season games than the Dolphins. But because I have other teams coming up, I was like, I will put the 84 Niners in that list, and I will give Oakland. I was thinking about there are people who listen to this podcast for Warriors and Giants stuff that are diehard Raiders fans. Some of them have been on the show, Candlestick Will, before you were even here. Shout outs to our boy Pete Zimmer. And I was kind of thinking, I was like, I know for a fact there are Raiders people, there are East Bay people that listen to this podcast, and I thought since I pretty much didn't want to put any Raiders team on this, I decided I would give them the 6th spot extremely begrudgingly, because to get 13-1 in that era was really tough. And they had the one loss before the 49ers got the one loss, so that's why I put them ahead of it. But it was not without deep frustration that I gave that number 6 spot to the Oakland.
No, I can appreciate that. All right, so here's my 7 through 4. So I've got the 1981 49ers, the 13
at 7.
At 7.
Yes.
I have the 2010 through 2014 Giants at number 6. Three championships, dynasty in baseball, which is actually super rare if you're not the Yankees. We've already talked about that on a previous podcast. Number 5 is the 1972 through 1976 Oakland Raiders. 55-13-2 over that span. They could have easily gone to 5 straight Super Bowls, but they ran smack into the Pittsburgh Steelers 3 times and the Miami Dolphins one other time. And
was that the perfect season, Dolphins?
It was the season after, 73. So the season after the Dolphins went undefeated, they faced the Raiders the next year in the playoffs and beat them. So one of the greatest teams ever assembled in Miami, and the greatest dynasty in football history, possibly in the Steelers of the 70s, kept the Raiders out of four of those 5 Super Bowls. And then the one Super Bowl they did go to, we already talked about it. You guys have had the 76 Raiders on your list. So I have that group of Raiders teams at number 5. And then at number 4, I've got the 1987 through 1990 49ers. I wanted to include the 87 season because of the Minnesota Vikings upset that kept them out of what easily could have been a Super Bowl run in 87, followed by back-to-back Super Bowls in 88, 89. 88 and 89, and then what was a field goal away from a three-peat in 1990.
Against the New York Giants.
Against the New York football Giants. The Niners in those 4 years went 51-12.
Jesus.
So those just to give you an idea how highly I think of my top 3, that 72 through 76 Raiders. Just to go back again, so you got the 13-3 49ers, the first championship in Bay Area. football history. At number 7, the Giants dynasty at number 6, the Raiders era in the 70s at number 5, and then the Niners Montana Rice lot domination 87 through 90 at number 4.
There you go. And I think that number 7, 1981 49ers, is the first time any of us have the same team on the same spot, I think, on this entire list.
Yeah, so far, huh?
Yeah, I think so. All right, Raymond, honorable mentions before we get to your top 3.
I mentioned the 2006-2007 We Believe Team Warriors that beat the Dallas Mavericks, who were the top seed that year. I think Dallas was 62-18, and actually I watched more Mavericks than I did Warriors that year because I thought Dallas with Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki were just so exciting to watch, and they had Nick Van Exel and Michael Finley. They had a really cool team that played really cool basketball that I hadn't seen quite before. So I mentioned, so I was surprised that the Warriors won, but I mentioned them because that was a pretty cool season for Warriors fans. And then I mentioned, Will, you actually had him in your list, the 1993 San Francisco Giants for winning over 100 games and not making the postseason because of the way the format was set up that season, which really kind of, it's one of those what ifs because they were really, really good that year. And so it just didn't make any sense for a team to play that well and still not make the postseason. So I'm glad that it took something like that to change the tournament format for major leagues, and of course that history changing occurrence belongs to the Giants. And then I also mentioned the 2000 to 2003 Oakland A's because I was still heavily watching baseball, in particular the A's at this time. They went to 4 playoff years. They went to the playoffs 4 times straight, and they got knocked out in the first round 4 times straight, and they got knocked out in 5 games 4 times straight. But they did win 100 games twice in that 4-year span. They were just the pitching on that team is what really I loved Tejada and Giambi and Eric Chavez and those guys too, but the big 3 was always the most exciting thing for me to watch because it was Zito, Mulder, and Hudson. I thought were just phenomenal. And I'd watched them from the very beginning of their careers all the way up until the end. So that was a very exciting time for baseball, and I was always stoked. I was always hoping that they would get past the hump, but they couldn't. They were kind of like a more short-lived version of the Atlanta Braves that actually was able to win a championship with their big 3, but never more than one, which was always the kind of sad part about having 3 big aces on your team for that long a stretch of time.
Nice.
And that was it. Just 3. I just had 3 teams.
I have 6 teams on my honorable mentions. The 1980 Raiders, because that's as far as you're getting on this list. The 2016 Golden State Warriors, the 73 win team. The 2002 Giants are number 4 on my honorable mentions list. Obviously getting to the World Series, losing Game 7 to the, I believe, the California Angels, which is a much better name than the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. That's the worst. Okay, number 3, the 2012 49ers, the sole 49er team to deliver a Super Bowl loss to us. Backbreaker, very sad. The number 2, 1989 Oakland A's, their one sole World Series in their 3-stretch run that we've already discussed. The infamous Earthquake Series, defeating my wonderful Giants. And this is a fun fact. October 17th, which is when the earthquake occurred before the beginning of the game, that was also is the anniversary of my parents' wedding. So every year on October 17th, there's always usually something out there, some report talking about the Bay Area Earthquake Series. They touch on it somewhere, the October 17th. They'll touch on that or the earthquake. Both occurred on my brother Raymond and I's anniversary and my parents' anniversary, October 17th. So I always think of it as synonymous with the World Series, the earthquake, and my parents getting married. All 3, one day. What a day. And then number one on on my honorable mentions is the 1974 NBA Finals winning Golden State Warriors. That is the number one on that list. All right, Candlestick Will.
So I'm giving shouts out to the 62 San Francisco Giants. Got to the World Series, lost in Game 7 to the New York Yankees. Willie McCovey line drive that got caught. Had it been just a couple feet higher, the Giants win the World Series in 1962. The 1987 through 89 San Francisco Giants. The 87 team finally getting to the playoffs. The 89 team finally getting to the World Series. Also, just quick shout-outs to the 97 Giants, the team of destiny, and then the parallel of yours, Ray, with the 2000 to 2003 A's. I want to shout out the 2000 to 2003 Giants. I had the Moneyball A's as well, but the Giants were pretty good in that era as well, with multiple MVPs with Bonds and Kent. And quite a few good teams that got to the playoffs every year in that run. You mentioned the We Believe Warriors. I also want to shout out the Run TMC Warriors with Mullen, Richmond, and Hardaway.
Nice.
Nelson teams were definitely worth consideration. You guys already mentioned that, Ray, you already mentioned the 2011 through 2013 49ers. Just a quick shout out to the 2000 to 2002 Raiders. With the Gruden.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, too.
The Gruden group that lost because Tom Brady fumbled and started that dynasty. And then just a shout out to all those playoff teams.
Was that the Tuck Rule game?
Yeah,
the infamous Tuck Rule game.
Yeah, the rule that was invented for just that one game.
Or as Greg Papa says, "Tuck you."
Yeah. Complete joke of the spirit of the rule and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we can talk about that in another podcast maybe. And then shout out to the Sharks for consistently making the playoffs nearly every year. Especially shout out to the couple of 8 times they were 8 seeds and beat 1 seeds back in the 90s. That was pretty epic, actually. A lot of people that didn't care about hockey probably became diehard Sharks fans after those series against the Red Wings and Flames, where they took down a 1 seed. So I'm not a big hockey guy, but hockey playoffs are always fun and exciting to watch.
I always say this. I've said this many times. If the Sharks move to San Francisco, I'm all in, baby. I am there. I am the most diehard homer. They just got to move north a little bit further.
I heard a live arena game of hockey is much more exciting than what you see on TV.
Of the 4 sports, hockey is definitely the one that's best seen in person.
Yeah, for sure.
Where it actually feels cold, and you get to see how truly fast the players are and how hard it really is.
Yeah, true. I've heard that many times. All right, Raymond, top 3. I am so intrigued because many of you have said teams that I suspected would be in your top 3. So now I'm at a complete loss at who the top 3 teams are for anybody here.
Well, my top 3, and for the record, I was watching both A's and Giants in the Moneyball era in case some comments come back to me as to why I mentioned the A's and not the Giants. I was watching the Giants back then, but the Giants got, outside of the 2002 World Series, got handily. They didn't make the playoffs in 2001, and then in 2003 and 2000 they made it to the next round, but just got spanked in those rounds. Or just got spanked in those first rounds 3-1, and so they were always out of it. And so there was always like 2 more games or 1 more game I could watch with the A's. So they, just because they lasted a little bit longer, I did lean towards them a little bit there. And I was also kind of a Bonds skeptic when the controversy came out. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way, especially when I found out some of my other former A's players were doing that stuff too. And so I rubbed me the wrong way, and I kind of lost respect for players. But I've gotten over it since over the years, because it's just like, whatever, just let them do it now.
It's baseball. Baseball is so synonymous with cheating. It practically should be its own rule. Like cheating people. have been cheating and been caught cheating in baseball forever. Like real, like the Astros thing. I'm like, this is just the latest controversy, dating all the way back to the Black Sox. I mean, this sport and cheating, it is so synonymous with one another. I don't know why cheating is so strong with baseball.
Pitchers are infamous for that. You know, there's so many rules against pitchers to prevent cheating because of how much cheating there was with, you know, greasing the ball and doing all kinds of things to manipulate the ball so that batters, you know, it's already really difficult to hit the ball as it is, but you throw in cheating and it's crazy.
It's all money and competition. You know, point shaving in the NBA, you know, back in the day, and the NFL with steroids was way more rampant than even in baseball. You know, if there's competition and money on the line, there's people are going to try and cheat, or they're just going to find whatever way they can to win. And if it includes cheating, most people will look the other way.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure.
So Raymond, what's yours?
Well, my big three. So my big three doesn't include any single season teams. It is all about dynasty, and that was the main criteria for the bot. It was the easiest category to sum up for me. And number three, I have and this might be different on your list. I almost guarantee it will be, maybe, I don't know, but I have the latest iteration of the Golden State Warriors, the 2015 to 2018 teams that went to 5 straight finals appearances, won 3 out of those 5, and had a combined record of 322 wins and 88 losses.
So crazy.
A just insane dominance there. That stretch is crazy. I almost included the previous 3 seasons, the previous seasons of playoffs under Mark Jackson, but I just wanted to stay within the championships. I thought that was more appropriate since that was what the other teams on my list had done. Number 2 on my list is the San Francisco Giants from 2010 to 2014. However, I excluded the 2 years that they didn't make it, and I'm just looking at the winning seasons. During that stretch, they were 274 and 212. And of course, they beat Texas, Detroit, and Kansas City. With the exception of Kansas City, the previous 2 were very dominant, and KC being the very exciting, wire, nail-biting win all the way to the very end.
It's my favorite. This is my absolute. I love them all.
It's a great one.
That one just because it was so hard.
Yeah, it was torture baseball at its best. Mm-hmm. And number 1, of course, I have the 1981 through 1994 San Francisco 49ers. Just the championship seasons. I didn't include all of those seasons, although there was a lot of wins in those seasons. Although, well, actually, I take it back. I did the record I did include. They were 159 and 56 in that 14-year stretch. But they went to 5 championships and they won all 5 championships. And that's why I put them at number 1, because of all the appearances that they made, they never lost. And the Giants are at number 2 for a similar reason. They went to 3 and won all 3. But the 49ers went to 5 of those and won all 5 within a 14-year stretch. I'm not sure when I think
better than the Patriots. It's better.
Yeah,
it's faster
I
and
did
better.
Faster than the Patriots.
Yeah, I think they did. I think theirs was in 16 or 17 years.
And so
they lost some in the middle.
I put Golden State at number 3 because they lost 2 of those 5. Had they won those 5, had they won all 5 of those, I would have probably put them. It would have been a 2-way tie or a 1 and 2 between the Niners and the Warriors. But that's my list.
I would have put the Golden State Warriors at number 1 had they won the 2. I would have done that. I think it would have been undeniable. So here's my list. At number 3, this list has been mentioned on several other people's. I'm surprised it was not higher. I put the 1972 to 1974 Oakland A's as the number 3 greatest Bay Area sports team of all time. It's almost impossible to win 3 World Series titles in a row. The Yankees have only been the other team to do it. So I had to put the Oakland A's at number 3 just for the achievement of how tough that is in baseball. Number 2, I went with, so for this 3, I forgot to explain this, I was going to say this in the beginning. I went with the dynasties, but I went with the actual back-to-back runs. Those were that to me made it very easy. I was like, I think the only teams that deserve, that can be possibly, and, I broke up, you guys took whole eras of teams. I went for individual championship runs as being my one criteria. If all things being equal, the only thing I used was, did this team win a title that year? And so I thought it was pretty easy. The only teams that would make the top three were the dynasties, the ones that actually won, not necessarily dynasties, but back-to-backs. And so the 2016-2017 Golden State Warriors, they go back-to-back with Kevin Durant. I mean, they just absolutely dominated. It was destruction. Had Kevin Durant stayed, this easily would turn out to be probably the greatest run of any NBA team ever. But having said that, the 5 was pretty insane and is still considered one of, if not the greatest run that a single team has made in the modern era of basketball. But I put the 2016-2017 back-to-back Golden State Warriors as the second greatest Bay Area sports team of all time. And at number 1, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, it's the 1988-89 San Francisco 49ers, the other back-to-back. This closes out the 80s dynasty for the 49ers. The last one won by Walsh, the last 2 with Joe Montana as our quarterback, and the dominance displayed. 1988 is my favorite Super Bowl of all time, Super Bowl 23, the John Candy Drive. This is followed up in dominating fashion in 89, coming back again to win the final Super Bowl for this particular run, obviously, and that kind of made it a no-brainer. Obviously, in 89, we defeat the Denver Broncos, handing John Elway is absolutely dismantled by our defense. Those 5 interceptions, the defense, I think, really, for me, was the highlight of the Denver Bronco run. But 55-10 against the Broncos, they only scored 10 points. And again, destroying yet another famous quarterback that people on ESPN love to sometimes rewrite history and put ahead of. No Dan Marino, no John Elway. There's 2 at the top. I don't even like number 1. There's Tom Brady and there's Joe, and I don't give a shit what anybody says. Those are the 2. And everyone else, you're literally reinventing history to hot take it, and I think it's an insult to guys who have won at the highest level of all time. So those are my top 3 were my back-to-backs. Oakland A's 72-74, Golden State Warriors 2016-2017, and then number 1, San Francisco 49ers 1988 through 1989. 3, 2, and 2.
So my top 3, my number 3 is the 1984 49ers, the best 49er team of the 5 Super Bowls. In my opinion, 15-1, absolute domination. We're told that their defense couldn't handle Marino, and then they bitch slapped Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins, and literally the most talented group that they ever had. 89 Niners were also pretty incredible, but the 84 team was special, and 15-1 is all the proof you need for that. Number 2, I have the 72-74 Oakland A's.
Ooh, we were so close
to three-peat like that in baseball. We talked about it with the Giants, how rare dynasties are. The 72-74 A's, not only sweeping or not only winning 3 straight, but also having to beat the Reds, who were a dynasty in and of themselves. So to beat the Reds head on in that 3-year run also is pretty impressive. And then because I haven't mentioned them in any way, shape, or form until now, it's pretty obvious that my number 1 is the Steve Kerr 5-year run, Golden State Warriors 2015 through 2019. Not only complete domination, the most wins in NBA history in any 5-year stretch, 3 championships. The 2 years they didn't win, they won the most games in the history of the sport. No teams ever won as many games combined, playoffs and regular season, as they did when they won 73 games in the regular season and then 15 games in the postseason. So they tied with the 72-win Bulls, who won 16 games, obviously, when they won the championship that season for them. And then last year, losing in 6 to the Raptors, despite going down with both Durant and Klay Thompson. Had both stayed healthy, I think the Warriors beat the Raptors and win 3 straight. And then who knows what the team looks like at this point. But the Warriors the last 5 years are the best group of Bay Area teams I've ever seen in my lifetime. So they were an easy number 1 for me.
Yeah, definitely. When you hold the criteria and in that perspective, that domination and in that time period is pretty remarkable. I'd say only to be matched by the 5 Super Bowl winning 49ers, but they didn't go 5 straight. But that's I see where you're coming from on that. Raymond, remind me of your number 1 more time.
The San Francisco 49ers from 81 to 94. The 5 championship dynasty.
The whole dynasty. Yeah. I mean, either one of those two. And my number 1 and number 2 are the 2 back-to-backs that both those teams had, just in different orders. So actually, funny how very similar at the end. Raymond, who was your 2 and 3 again? I don't know why I'm running a blank on this. But
the 2010-2014 Giants and the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, pretty close.
I almost put the A's in there because of the feet alone, but I think bias wanted me to have San Francisco represented in the 3. I think that was the only reason why I kept them out. But I put them in 4. The top 4 are all dynasties.
It's important at the top 11 podcast. We believe in bias. We encourage bias, and we also encourage honesty. So when we're biased, it's always important that you share that you are, because I think it's important when anyone makes a subjective list that you're able to defend it. And if part of the defense is that you're biased because you love the team so much, it's like, well, how can someone fault you for that?
Yeah.
No, exactly.
And I wasn't alive during the 70s team, so I didn't get to see it. Our father saw it, but I didn't get to see it. So I just heard the stories and watched old footage. So I didn't really get to experience it the same way I experienced the Giants, by championship run that they had, where it was every other year. So but I experienced that completely. So it obviously resonates with me much more than the 70s team. Although the 70s run is impressive for all the points that you guys both mentioned. It's really, really hard to win 3 straight in baseball. And that's why only 2 teams have done it since the 70s.
Well,
yeah,
I think,
if I was going to...
go ahead.
Go ahead, Candlestick Will.
No, I was just going to say, because if I had done just single seasons, and this is the reason why I didn't, I probably would have stuck to just teams I'd seen. And so I wouldn't have included any of the teams from the 70s had I done that. But I also might have had the 2018 Warriors at number 1, the 2017 Warriors at number 2, and the 2016 Warriors at number 3. Because the 2 Kevin Durant championships, those teams were just so incredibly dominant. And the 73 win team, even though they didn't win, it was, I mean, I think it's, the John Saunders who passed away, when people would talk about the college football needing a playoff, he always mentioned that the one thing he loved about college football was that every single week was a championship level week, because if you lost one game, you wouldn't be able to play for the national championship. And so what he was always discouraging a playoff, because if Alabama loses to anyone, then they have a chance to not be in the national championship, and that makes every single Saturday important. And that 2016 Warrior team, as soon as they got on that win streak to start the season, every single game became the most important game on the schedule for sports. You had to Warriors basketball for all 82 games that season was must-see TV because of that 24-game win streak and what that created. And that phenomenon was just insane. The year that Steph had, the way Klay was playing, Draymond as a defender, and then the fact that was it. They were just those 3 guys and then a bunch of dudes. It wasn't, Iguodala was obviously a very good player, but he wasn't playing at an all-star level at that time. Andrew Bogut was just a guy who could protect the rim and was a good passer. Harrison Barnes was way too young to be a dominant player. So you had just a bunch of guys that just couldn't stop winning. And it was incredible to watch and made that just incredible to see. And now, the way the team is now, it's like the regular season's irrelevant. I know the team this year isn't any good, but the next few years, even with Durant, the regular seasons just didn't seem to have the same importance, because it was like, just wait till we get to May and June. So there was something.
They definitely started coasting a lot
about
once Kevin Durant was on the team. They started coasting a lot once KD joined the team. They go in these just stretches.
Well, and I think too, after 2015, they win the first championship, and then they go on that win. Had they lost the second game of the season or the fifth game of the season, I don't think they pushed the pedal the way they did in 2016, the same way, except for the fact that every single commentator at some point in the 2015 season wanted to put an asterisk on that championship because of injuries to players in every round of the playoffs. So I think Curry and Clay and Draymond went into that season saying, oh yeah, an asterisk? Well, check this out. We're going to win every game. And they played like it. And it was, I can't stress enough how amazing the regular season was. It was the only regular season in my lifetime where every game mattered. And, if they had the same technology in the 80s, I'm sure the Showtime Lakers or the 80s Celtics would have felt the same way, because it would have been like a rock show was in town, every night. But that wasn't the way we were able to consume sports in the 80s. It was maybe once a week we'd see a game. So even the 90s Bulls, as much as that was incredible, we didn't get the chance to see them play night in and night out. So when they came into town, it was like, here come the Beatles. But for the Warriors, the whole nation and the whole country, or the whole world really, could watch 82 games, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen.
Totally. So that's actually, and kind of rounding it out, if I was to do eras, for sure, the Giants dynasty would have been its own number. But because I was kind of going individual seasons, that's actually why I put the 2010 Giants at number 4, right as the lead in to the three back-to-back teams that won multiple championships in a row. I put 2010 at number 4 for that reason. It was like, that's the closest I could get based on my personal criteria and how I was generating this list. That's why I actually have a team, I lead off with the 2012 Giants. I come back at number 9 with 2014, and then I drop the 2010 at number 4. So they really are I sprinkled those guys through there. And then, but I'm not just arbitrarily, I don't think any of us are. I don't want you guys to think I'm just arbitrarily putting teams in just random numbers, closing my eyes. I'm like, okay, where do these teams belong in this particular group of greatest Bay Area sports teams? And I was like, well, the 2010, they lead off. They're the first team to get the titles in San Francisco, so they deserve the number 4 spot. They deserve the spot right before the top 3 for me, based on my personal criteria. So I had to put them at number 4, and I put, obviously Young's at 5, Steve Young's Niners at 5. But then, that's I've already kind of gone over why I chose the teams I chose for mine. But all good lists. Raymond, any final thoughts from you?
Just that it was, I thought it was fun, and it was challenging because I had to think about individual season performances as well as dynasty performances, so it was a little tricky in that regard. And
because you did not have the criteria. You didn't have to win a championship to get on your list. You had a bunch of teams that hadn't won championships on the list.
Yeah. So, and to be honest, I didn't look past the 70s. I didn't look at 60s or 50s. I just felt like that was too deep. Where where most of the people listening, can probably relate to the 70s, but probably not past that. Because our family was just getting to San Francisco in the 60s, so there's just and it's just such a far different era, especially between the sports. The sports have changed so much since then, so I think sticking with the 70s and on was kind of an easy one for me, because I know what significance has been accomplished by all of the Bay Area sports teams. So I think I was like, I had a feeling at one point I was missing like 2 or 3 spots, and I was like, there's got to be something else. And so made me dig a little bit, and I was like, all right. I was like, well, and that's why I gave the top spots, the very top of the list, which I think are reserved for the teams that have accomplished less than the middle and the top 3. I gave that to the teams who had at least gone to a championship or had some kind of significant run with a championship appearance for that part.
Yeah, it's a really interesting list. This was, we had no rules, which I think actually really spiced it up. And as the listeners are sitting listening, I mean, if you want to know what all the dominant Bay Area teams were, you got them all. we covered them somewhere. The best Bay Area sports teams of the last 40 years, there are somewhere on this list. I don't think we left anybody out. I mean, even Candlestick Will dropping Run TMC. I mean, like we got all the runs in. There's everybody's represented.
Well, and I think the whole point of this podcast and what I had envisioned, and then what we did with the previous one with the greatest 49ers is when you make rules, you limit creativity, you limit people coming up with ideas that maybe you hadn't even thought of. And so if we had said, no, it has to be single seasons, then these lists would have been a little boring in some ways because it would have been, 3 or 4 Niner teams, 3 or 4 Warrior teams in the last few years.
Right.
And then some of the teams that we mentioned, like, some of the Raiders teams, some of the Giants teams maybe barely get mentioned. Also for me, like when I started going through this, the first thing I realized was, well, I have to have the 2016 Warriors on here somehow. So as soon as I did that, it opened up the door for teams like the 93 Giants that won 103 games, not just mentioning the 89 A's, but also mentioning the fact that they went to the World Series 3 straight years. And so, playoffs can be such a crapshoot. It's like one of my honorable mention was the 2011 to 2013 49ers because they went to 3 straight NFC championship games. And then Kyle Williams fumble. If he doesn't fumble and they win that game, maybe they win that Super Bowl. So, when teams were so close to a championship, that group, deserves to be, looked at favorably and not just as, well, who won and who didn't. Because if it was just, who are the 11 best champions, that's a pretty boring list. So, and like I said.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
And so, well, no, and I'm not even slighting your list, Rudy. I'm amplifying the fact that you had every right to have a list of champions. Because
totally. I'm just teasing you, too.
No, I understand that. But at the same time, it's like that's the beauty of this, is that you could make the case that, no, if you didn't win a championship, then you didn't have one of the best seasons, because one of the things that we've realized from all 3 of our lists is that the Bay Area has a ton of great eras and a ton of great talent over the last 35, 40 years. And that's what these lists did from the 3 of us, is it really shined a light on how many good teams there were from all 5 of these teams.
To be honest, you're absolutely right. Like, to piggyback to yes and you on that, if you are the rare person, and there's not many of them, but if you're the rare person that roots for all 5 teams, you root for the Niners, the Giants, the Warriors, the A's, and the Raiders, I mean, you're pretty much a pig in mud. I mean, there's always someone making a run at a championship. Every era, there's somebody, and most times someone's bringing you a ring.
Well, and I think, one thing we could do on a future list is go by, what's the best years in Bay Area history. And that way we have to cross-check all 6 teams, if you want to include the Sharks, and be like, all right, what was the most dominant year, where the most teams were in the playoffs? Because even like Ray and I were both mentioning the 2000 through 2003 Giants. It's like both baseball teams were good in that era. Well, so were the Raiders from 2000 to 2002. They were in the playoffs every year. So it's like, would one of those seasons be one of the best 11 seasons in Bay Area? Like, what was the best year to be a fan in the Bay Area? The 70s were obviously amazing in Oakland, right? The A's, Warriors, and Raiders were all good in the 70s. So, when the Niners and Giants weren't, so where do those fall in like the greatest Bay Area seasons, that kind of thing? So that could be another way of looking at these teams as a fun top 11 topic.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with that. That's actually a fun way to look at it. There's just so many different ways you can twist it and mess with it. So what say you, Goldcast Nation? Who are your top 11 Bay Area sports teams? What's the criteria? Is it single season achievements, how I did it? Is it eras, the way Candlestick Will and Ray did it? Let us know. Go to youtube.com/thegoldcast or go. I don't have our Twitter handle because you're the one in charge of that handle. Candlestick Will, tell them what the handle is one more time. They can go onto Twitter.
Yeah, so it's just Top 11 Podcast, so Top 11 Podcast. And as soon as this drops, I'll obviously share it on there. But by all means, please, I'm going to send out a tweet right now with my 11 through 8 as a tease. So feel free to share your top 11 on that tweet or any other tweet that you see.
Excellent. Absolutely. Share it. Let us know who are your top 11 Bay Area sports teams. And again, like as Candlestick Will, the beauty is we don't put a criteria. Obviously our bias against the Raiders played a heavy reasons why they only got honorable mentions or very rare mentions on this list. I know I'm probably going to get a text message from Pete Zimmer, a guy who's come on to the show before, giving me crap about how little represented the Raiders were, but that's what they get. And because they're leaving again, so that I'll even throw that in as another knock against them. All right, folks. So concludes another edition of the Top 11 Podcast. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby,
and our esteemed co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom. We'll see you next time. Same. Well, I don't know what I can't say same because we're rolling these out a little slowly at a time, but we'll be back soon with another great Top 11 podcast. Stay on to the Twitter handle. Candlestick Will is our main guy. He's the main. He's our chief officer when it comes to the Top 11 podcast. And go to Twitter. Follow us on Twitter right there because that is where most of our top 11 discussion is happening. So you want to stay up to date as we begin to branch out, not only just from sports, but start going into other genres of pop culture and deciding what we think our top 11s of those are. So stay tuned, and we'll be back actually a little bit later in the week with more football on the Goldcast. All right, folks. We'll see you next time.
This is the Goldcast.